So the Telling Project started in 2008, technically is the first year we went to stage. We started our first production in 2007. And it started basically as an effort to do outreach at the University of Oregon on behalf of a student veteran organization. I had been working with them for a couple of years at that point as an advisor. We had done outreach of any number of different kinds and had limited success. And so we were casting around, trying to come up with some ideas, and I came up with this notion of a play. Part of the reason that I came up with the notion of a play was because it involved a construction process which would allow these folks to identify their stories and then rehearse them. Essentially give them some preparation and some skills before they went on stage and shared some very difficult and vulnerable parts of themselves. The other part of the equation for me was that theater was going to bring a certain audience in, and that happened to be a demographic that we were having a hard time reaching out to. It was a tremendous success, but I think more than that it was an epiphany, which was that these folks didn't want to crouch over their beers in the back of the VFW. They didn't want to put that experience away and have it not be a part of their lives anymore. They actually wanted to talk about these experiences. And their community wanted to actually listen to them as well. But coming up with the ways in which that could happen where people would feel comfortable enough to do it was the trick, and that's what we had done.
The first night, the very first rehearsal that we had, we gathered in the Harry Davis room, and everyone was kind of like, well, what is this? What's going on? They were very curious to see how their stories were going to be woven together and how a script was going to be kind of created from their experiences and so forth. And after we got through that first read-through, the energy in that room was pretty intense. It was like, oh, I get it now. This is what it's about. And it was a pretty defining moment, I think, for everyone. And I wouldn't say immediately, but very shortly thereafter, there was a different kind of level of respect. And there was always a level of respect in the room, but it was a more intimate connection to one another. And there's something that happens when people come together and share their stories and engage in authentic human connection that we are missing a lot of today in our society. So I think that experience and for these individuals has been an incredible journey. Theater is always about the ability to connect the human experience through live performance and through stories. And so that's really what I pressed on them, is that these are your stories, these are intimate experiences. And so for individuals that might be perceived as something different than being an emotional connected person, I think that was really important. So I always went back to their story, to what it is that they are trying to express. It was stripping away this notion of, I need to act. I need to do something in a certain way, and it was more, just tell me the story.
It's a unique situation because you dictate your story to somebody who turns it into a script. Then the memorizing of the script becomes a retelling of your story through his words. So it's been very interesting, and in some ways it makes it easier. It's your story. In some ways it makes it harder because now the words are important because you're going to be out there on stage. It widened my understanding, maybe appreciation of each of the 7 stories I've heard. They're all as exciting, they're all as human and real and important as mine. And we all sacrificed in our own way, and we all gained in our own way. And yet it's 7 distinct stories. So that's what I've gained.
It's been really interesting. We have a very diverse group, but we all have those really great times to talk about and those really stressful times to talk about. And I think we've learn to be very comfortable around each other and be ourselves around them. Well, some of my lines are pretty intense. It's a story I've never told anyone except for my kids and my husband, but I'm a former health teacher, and I think it's really important to talk about social power violation events. And I never felt comfortable doing it because as a teacher I didn't want my students to judge me or to feel sorry for me because of things that had happened in my past. But I want other females and other males that have had a bad experience in the sexual nature, well, it's not really sexual, power nature, to feel comfortable.
It's been very difficult to hear the stories again and again because we have to rehearse and we have to tell them. And in some ways, that's been good because it inures you to hearing it. But even so, hearing Larry do his monologue, I mean, there's some really painful stuff that everybody has to talk about. Well, not everybody, but most folks have some pretty difficult stuff. And so it's rather like group therapy. You're sitting here listening to other people's pain, as well as telling our own stories. And the interesting thing about that is that it's typical with a group of veterans that are, pretty well functioning people that we always minimize our own stories, our own discomfiture. It's rather matter of fact because that's what it takes to live with it. What I think was the biggest thing to get past for myself was remembering that just because I know my story doesn't mean I tell it as effectively as I could. I'd like to take away some new relationships. I feel like I have a bit better understanding of my story, and I take away insights.